is September the 17th, 2024. The time is 9:02 a.m. I would like to call to order the the City of Tampa Historic Preservation Commission. Welcome, everyone. I am your chair, Dominique Cobb, of the commission. If you are here to present a project, you have limited time to make your presentation. So we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commission will not ask any questions during the presentation. And if we can have the introduction of the commissioner starting.
Bruce Gibson, architecture.
Carrie Ann Canch, alternate.
Tom Pluckon, archaeologist.
Susan Swift, planner.
And staff, we have Dennis Fernandez. We also have Alexis. Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting everybody's name. Where's that?
It's Guzman.
Gooseman, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Heather Bonds and attorney Pettis Mackle. Thank you. My apologies for the name. And Elaine Lund. Thank you. Dennis.
Good morning. Our first action today would be to approve the minutes from our July 16th public hearing. So we would need a motion to do that if there are no changes.
So moved.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We would like to go ahead and receive the minutes as approved for the July 16th, 2024 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Welcome to today's hearing, and welcome to both our applicants and those joining us on the city television. I do have just one brief announcement. In your packets is the 2025 Historic Preservation Commission schedule. This will be provided, if it has not already been provided to you, digitally as well, and it is available on our site. So I believe we are already in the cycle that would take us to January for our applications. So the year went very quick. We still have one meeting scheduled within this year in November, however. Also, I would like to introduce our reoccurring piece called Preservation in Progress. This is a segment which we are presenting at each board hearing for both the Historic Preservation Commission and then the Architecture Review Commissions, the ARC and the BLC. We do this monthly. This is meant to both bring attention to preservation efforts that are occurring in the community that you may not be aware of, and then to kind of tie those into our program and to the standards that are utilized when these projects are underway. So this morning, Elaine will present a segment on Fire Station number 2 located in Ybor City. Elaine?
Thank you. As Mr. Fernandez stated, this morning we're looking at Fire Station number 2 at 1313 East 8th Avenue. This is the oldest standing fire station in the city of Tampa, and it's located in Ybor City, within the Ybor City Historic District boundaries. So this is the map of the Ybor City Historic District. The property in question is actually located, let's see if we have the, no, sorry. It's located on the west side, southwest side of this historic district. You can see it here on the 2024 aerial map between 7th and 8th Avenue, just east of 13th Street and west of Avenida República de Cuba. This is the 1892 Sanborn Company map showing the location of the fire station. Previously, prior to 1892, the excuse me, the fire station was located across 8th Avenue just to the north on the site of the Vicente Martinez Ybor and Company Cigar Factory. It was known then as the Mirta Hook and Ladder Volunteer Fire Station and was established in 1886. If you see the images on the right side of the screen there, you can see the cigar factory, and then just to the left of it, excuse me, to the south, the wood frame building that served as the housing for the fire station. The Ybor factory complex was expanded in 1888, and the fire station was moved across the street, where it was transitioned into the city of Tampa's actual public fire station when the city established a fire department. Fire station number 2 was replaced in 1924. At that point, the building was used for multiple purposes, one of them being a cigar factory warehouse. And fire station number 2, as I stated, is significant as the oldest remaining and only extant 19th century example of a fire station in the city of Tampa. In 2016, the building was proposed for an adaptive reuse project. You can see how it looked in 2016, not very much like a fire station at all at that point. The owner applied for an historic property ad valorem tax exemption, which is a program that allows for the property taxes to be reduced for a period of up to 10 years with a layout fee of at least $10,000 for the value of the improvements to the historic property. The status was changed by the HPC in 2016 from non-contributing to contributing, and I believe that was a condition of the approvals by the Barrio Latino Commission. And then most recently, the properties come forward for signage approval. And this is how it looks today. So the rehabilitation has been completed. You can see that the signage at the top of the building has been restored, along with the cornice. The main entry, the stucco's been taken off to reveal the original brick work, and the main entry doors, the composition there has been replicated from some of the historical photographs. The application of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, standards 5, 6, and 7 were applied, wherein the distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques are examples of craftsmanship that characterize the historic property were preserved or restored in this case. The deteriorated features were repaired rather than replaced. Replacement of the missing features was substantiated by the documentary or pictorial evidence. And then chemical and physical treatments such as sandblasting were not used to not damage the historic materials of the building. And then there's another lovely 1890s picture of the property for you. So with that, we will continue with this morning's agenda.
Thank you, Lane. Just one reason why we do these types of presentations is to show you obviously the successes of projects like the fire station's rehabilitation, but also to call to your attention the different processes that the city has in place that were occurring when this project was being envisioned, and we worked with the property owner. It was a non-contributing structure because those dramatic changes that you had seen to the building were done prior to the area being designated a historic district. And so when the inventories were conducted and it was such a dramatic change from the original design, the building was designated as non-contributing. But the owner had understood the value of the building and saw, the potential. And so we worked with them to develop the necessary documents to bring them back to the HPC to designate the building as contributing, which is always, an accomplishment when you're able to bring a structure that's built within the period of significance but is non-contributing and bring the recognition and protections of the district to it. And then working, once the designation was in place, working with the incentives, the ad valorem tax exemption, and I believe there were some facade grants that were received through the CRA in Ybor City as well, to assist in the rehabilitation, and then working with the barrio to really work out the details of bringing the building back. And I think you can see the value of having the historic photos, so there's accuracy in that effort and not conjecture. So we hope you are enjoying these and learning a little bit along the way. That's our goal. And if you have any questions or if you have a particular project that you'd like to see, please let us know and we'll work on that for a future hearing. With that, I think we'll go ahead and move through the rest of the items to begin the hearing. Our first is disclosure of conflicts of interest and ex parte communication, which our legal counsel will lead that.
Kamaria Pettis-Malcolm from the City Attorney's Office. Will the commissioners please state whether or not they have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items that are on the agenda?
No.
Thank you. Will the commissioners please state whether or not they have any ex parte communications regarding any of the items that are on the agenda? No. Okay, thank you.
With that, we are ready for our swearing. Anyone in the audience who's going to be presenting or testifying at today's hearing, please stand and raise your right hand, including staff, and Ms. Guzman will administer the swearing.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony to be providing today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. And with that, we're ready for our first application. That is the local historic landmarking under HPC 24-000027. And Lane will present the introduction to the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff. This morning, we have do you have a PowerPoint here to sort of get us started on discussing this house that we're presenting to you for local historic landmark designation? This is the Dobie House at 1405 West Azeel Street in the Ybor City, located in the Hyde Park Historic District. The Hyde Park Historic District was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1985, and you can see the boundaries for the historic district shown in, for the National Register Historic District shown in blue on this map on your screen here. Just to orient you, with Hyde Park a little bit, the Hillsborough River and the Hillsborough Bay are to its east, as is Bayshore Boulevard. Kennedy Boulevard runs north at the very north end of the National District there, and then you can see the Crosstown Expressway coming in from the east, cutting across, and then down southwest toward into the South Tampa Peninsula. The red boundary on this map is the local historic district for boundary for Hyde Park, and that's shown in red. And you can see that the two boundaries are very similar in some places, a little different in others. One of these areas is where this particular property is situated, and that's the Dobie House, and it's shown where the green arrow is pointing. It's located actually outside the National Register boundaries, but within our local historic district boundaries. This is the current aerial map showing the location of the property. You can see how close it is to the Crosstown Expressway. It's surrounded, well, not surrounded, sorry. It sits with property that is owned by the Expressway Authority, directly adjacent to it on the west, and not too far away from it on the north. This is the 1915 Sanborn Insurance Company map showing the property at that time on the north side of Azeel, again between Orleans and Oregon Avenues, and the diagonal line that you see just to the west there is the line that was put in place for Henry Plant's railroad, and I believe for the majority of its time, for a long period of time, this was known as the ACL railroad track. So I'm going to pause here in the presentation and ask our applicant, Ms. Tara Nealon, to come forward and make a brief statement regarding her application for this property.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Tara Nealon at 1405 West Azeel. I am the applicant for the local landmark designation on the property, and after reviewing the report and discussions, I fully support this. For the cultural significance to the city, I am of course grateful for the good work of our 3 neighborhood associations and all the neighbors who put forth all the effort to include parts of Dobyville into the local historic district. And now we can designate this home specifically. As you know, Mr. Doby was noted to have been a pioneer in the Black communities in the city of Tampa 100 years ago. His prominence and community mindedness led to the neighborhood being referred to as Dobyville. And I've come to learn that land donated by Mr. Doby for a school and a church no longer exists, and the Zion Cemetery was lost for quite some time. However, 1405 West Azeel remains. The local landmark designation helps to keep the Doby family and Richard Doby's contributions, his story alive, and the Dobyville stories alive for the city of Tampa. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I'll move forward with the rest of the presentation, which will encompass our staff report here. So Hyde Park, was an early suburb of the city of Tampa. It was, across the river. Originally had to be accessed by ferry before the earliest bridges were built spanning the Hillsborough River. One of those was at what is today known as Kennedy Boulevard. It was put in place at first, I believe, around 1888. The first bridge there, which was intended actually to bring people to Henry Plant's Tampa Bay Hotel, not to the Hyde Park suburb, but it did serve a purpose for the Hyde Park residents as well. 1913 and 1915, you can see how Hyde Park grew and grew some more. So we have views here looking from 1906 looking north. In 1913, this is looking east toward the bay, and 1915 photo is looking from downtown toward Hyde Park. When we look at the 1931 Sanborn Company map, we see that Hyde Park and the development around it did extend a little further west than what we may typically think as what is Hyde Park today. A large portion of this area was known for a period of time as West Hyde Park, or Dobyville, so named for Mr. Richard C. Doby, who was one of the prominent businessmen and landowners in the area. Again, the Doby house is shown with the green arrow, and the approximate boundaries for Dobyville are shown in the green lines. And again, the National District boundaries are in blue, and the local historic district boundaries for Hyde Park are shown in red. So you can see that the local historic district, which is the area in which we have local government oversight of improvements to properties, some of that area and the Dobyville neighborhood do overlap. Dobyville was a thriving community, had an elementary school, multiple churches. I mean, it wasn't just residential, it had services there that served the, all aspects of the lives of the residents of Dobyville. The Dobyville residential houses were typically small, maybe around, under 1,000 feet or so, square feet, and typically on small, narrow lots closely packed together. A lot of businesses sprang up along the railroad line that ran through Dobyville, and So in addition to being able to work at those businesses, many of the Dobyville residents worked in the domestic services for the Hyde Park property owners. A large portion of the houses in Dobyville, we know, were, the majority of the houses in Dobyville were rental properties, but this area did have a fairly high homeowner rate compared to other neighborhoods in Tampa that had a high Black population. Dobyville was noted in a document from 1927. I believe it was funded in part by, that's escaping me at the moment. But it was funded by various local community organizations. It was the study of Black life in Tampa. And from that document, we've been able to put together information about daily life in neighborhoods such as Dobyville, such as the Scrub, East Tampa, College Hill, neighborhoods such as that. So this is a 1957 aerial looking southwest along the railroad line. You can make out Swan Avenue, sort of in the upper left corner of the picture, the railroad line cutting diagonally through the photo, and Horatio Street, Oregon. Azeel is down at the bottom of the photo. And then the Dobie house would be just a little bit to the east of that. So it's just out of the frame there, I believe. But the some of the notable buildings that you can see in this photo, we have the bakery factory, the bread factory that is a local landmark, and also the Dobyville School is present in this picture. The Dobyville School is no longer standing. I believe it was torn down in the 1960s. So in addition to some of the challenges that were going on in the Hyde Park area at this time, there was a lot of relocation out of the original suburbs as the city was spreading. Hyde Park in the 1970s and 1980s was not the neighborhood we know today. It had many of the houses in the neighborhood had fallen into disrepair. A lot of them had been split into multifamily units, and one of the thoughts on how to revive the community was to create the local historic district and the National Register historic districts. This did improve property values and neighborhood and homeownership investment in the area. One of the other kind of interesting ideas was that bringing this new idea for a crosstown expressway through Hyde Park would also help reestablish some of the commercial development in the area. So this is a map from 1973, an aerial map. You can see as we go forward in time the Crosstown Expressway development. So it comes in between Cleveland and Azeel Streets here, taking out a large swath, I believe, multiple dozens of blocks of this neighborhood. As we move through, we see 1976, you can see the construction of the crosstown, and then finally I think we moved to 1980 when the crosstown was finally complete. And again, the purpose of this is to show you how the effect that the crosstown had on bisecting part of the Hyde Park neighborhood and the proximity of the Dobie house to the Crosstown Expressway. This is the present day aerial. Not much has changed as regarding the proximity of the house to the expressway there. One of the thoughts behind the Crosstown Expressway improving the economic condition of the Hyde Park area was that In addition to taking out a lot of the dilapidated structures, the area was also rezoned, sort of upzoned, to allow for a greater density and intensity of uses in the area near the crosstown. So a lot of the older Dobyville housing has been impacted by this, and that a lot of it was demolished to make way for not only the Crosstown Expressway, but also for construction of the higher intensity and density uses in the area, such as if just to the west of the Crosstown, south of Azeel Street, and south of Platt Avenue, there's a very large apartment complex. So that's one example of the higher intensity uses that were built in the area, taking out a large portion of Dobyville. And then, even today, we see developers coming into this area and building apartment complexes and condominiums instead of the lower density single-family uses. So to sort of summarize a few things about the Dobie House. It was constructed in circa 1912. We do believe that that's a fairly accurate date. And it's significant for its association with Richard C. Dobie. So as the applicant stated, and as I sort of touched on, Richard Dobie was a successful black businessman in the city. He had, we know for certain from various newspaper articles, we know he had an ICE delivery service. He had a waste management company, so he was known for his services in the Hyde Park area for those uses. He also bought and sold a great deal of real estate in the city of Tampa, a lot of it in that Dobyville area, some of it outside the Dobyville area. A particularly notable site was the location of the Zion Cemetery. He purchased that tract of property for use as a burial site and donated it for use as a burial site for the Black Americans who lived in the city of Tampa, and it was actually outside the city of Tampa, so the Tampa area. He also donated money to establishments such as churches, and he donated the land for the neighborhood school in Dobyville. So Richard C. Dobie's contributions would be in the areas of community planning and development and ethnic heritage, as these were pretty impressive accomplishments for a black man in living in the South at this point in time. The designation application was submitted in April of this year, and the public notice requirements have been met, so we can move forward with your review of this property this morning. The Dobie House meets the requirements for local historic landmark designation found in sections 27257A1 and 2 and section 27257C of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances. It's associated with significant events and associated with significant persons. And our recommendation today, staff's recommendation, is that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend the Dobie House at 1405 West Azeel Street to Tampa City Council for local historic landmark designation. And with that, I am available if you have any questions.
At this time, commissioners?
Yes, I have a question. Or first, let me just say this was a really fantastic report. I enjoyed reading all of it. Very thorough, fascinating stuff. What I didn't hear you say anything about was, since the house is in the local historic district, how is it currently classified in the district, as contributing or non-contributing, and will this change its current designation in any way?
Yes, this is a contributing structure to the local Hyde Park Historic District. It is not contributing to the National Historic District. The information about this property having been in the Dobie family was not present on its survey form from when they did the initial survey for this district, so I believe that knowledge was not there at the time. Whoever did the initial inventory for Hyde Park didn't know that this house was related to Richard Dobie. So it's not contributing to the national district, but it does contribute to our local historic district.
So just to follow up on that, is it contributing under C?
We are
Because
not,
C was left
yeah,
up, yeah.
right, we are
But
not
you left C
considered,
off of this application.
we're not considering it under C because of the alterations that have been done to the property. It has been clad in stucco and part of the front porch has been enclosed. So it's not one of the better representations of the vernacular architecture of the area at this point in time. It could be rehabilitated and we could consider it again under that criteria at a later date. But for now, we are basing our recognition, our landmark designation recognition, our recommendation is to base it on its association with Mr. Dobie.
Any other questions, Commissioners? All right, seeing none at the time, would anyone like to make a recommendation of either the approval or disapproval of this landmark designation?
Can you just, can you just see if there's any public comment?
Oh, my apologies. Is there any public comment? If so, please come forward. All right, we would like to close this portion. All right, Commissioners? Would like to take a step?
Okay, I'll try reading this. I move to recommend Tampa City Council approve the request to designate the property located at 1405 West Dezeille Street for local historic landmark designation because the application meets the criteria established in the City of Tampa Code, Section 27-257, for the following reasons. And may I just read off the application?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Criteria A, the property is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. And criteria B, the property is associated with the lives of persons significant in our past.
Can I just, Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the legal department, can I just make a modification on the sheet? As the sample motion provides, you have to read A1, if that's what your desire is, A1, and these are the criteria, A, B, and C, and D, along with C according to the staff report. But you have to read, if this is your motion, you have to read A1 and 2, and then the criteria, I believe it follows up.
Okay, more reading to do. Okay, for the following reasons. A, the building site structure, object or district 1 was constructed or achieved its significance during the period of historic significance as delineated in the National Register of Historic Places, guidelines, or as established in the nomination pursuant to those guidelines. And number 2 has a quality of significance in American state or local history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture, which is present in district sites, building structures, and objects that possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And small letter I, that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history, otherwise known as Criterion A of the National Register criteria, and lowercase I, that are associated with the lives of persons significant in our past, otherwise known as Criterion B of the National Register criteria. And
Thank you. Would anyone?
I second that motion.
Those all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we would like to go ahead and accept that the property at 1405 West Azale Street as a local historic landmark designation.
Did you have a question?
All right, at the discretion of the commission, we would like to take a 5-minute recess. All right, thank you. We'll reconvene in a moment. Session. All right.
Okay. Kamari, I'm sorry, Mr. Fernandez, okay. Next on the agenda is regarding the rules of procedure update and adoption. Staff provided in your packet the previous rules that were adopted in September 21st, 2014, and the new revised proposed rules of procedure. And I could do like a brief presentation of the new information in the rules of procedure. For example, and I'm only looking at the new rules of the proposed rules of procedure that's dated September, it says September 17, 2024 at the top. Section 2.2, alternate members is a new section that's not defined in your original rules. And just as a background, these proposed rules of procedures were created so that all of the boards are consistent with the format and timelines, and most importantly, to address when there is a national emergency, when we need to, there's a hurricane coming and we have a public meeting, that we need to continue our agenda or not have a meeting. So moving on in section 3.2, that gives a definition of department. In 4.0, there's a distinction of regular meetings versus workshop that wasn't included before. And as I previously stated, 4.4 provides information on postponing a meeting because of declaration of a local state of emergency. And sometimes by chance, if city council needs to do like an emergency, like special call meeting, those meetings are done in chambers. And if you are also scheduled for a meeting, also same date and same time, we need to have the authority to move those meetings to an alternate location, and section 4.5 provides that provision. In 4.6, the quorum section, it's different. In your current rules, you are required to have 5 members. In 4.6, you will be required to have 4 members in order to conduct a meeting. The agenda section 4.8 gives a limitation on the types of cases that can be heard. There is a deadline process now in section 4.9 that was not previously in this rules of procedures that gives when the commission shall approve or deny an application within 180 days. There is a deadline or a process in which continuances can be granted and how long, when are they granted. They're at the request of the applicant, they're going to be continued for 2 months because there might already be set items on the next upcoming agendas, so not to backlog those who were already scheduled. In moving on to section 6.0, revisions to applications and revisions gives additional guidance on how that can impact the notice requirements if there are revisions to an application. And so those are important distinctions. But what is of biggest note in these rules of procedures, moving on to section 8.0, you now have timelines. You previously did not have time limits for applications. I'm sure you all recall there's been times when we've been here almost a day or a majority of a day, had to take a lunch break. There are time limits now on each of the applications that are coming before you. And those are the biggest notes in the changes, so that concludes my presentation. If the board doesn't have any, if the commission doesn't have any questions about it, I would ask that a motion be made to adopt the rules of procedure.
I have some questions. There are other changes that were not, you did not note, and
Right,
I know
I
you
didn't note every single change, but
Right.
there are changes, other changes.
Yes, I know you didn't intend to list all of them. The one that caught my attention, I guess, that I'm most concerned about is 2.10, which is familiarity with laws. Each member shall be thoroughly familiar with all statutes, laws, codes, and rules of procedure relevant to his or her commission. So there's a couple of things that strike me about that. That seems more like possibly a condition of serving. I don't see how that's necessarily a rule of procedure. And I'm not sure why members are to be thoroughly familiar with all of these laws. We're not lawyers, and we are generally familiar, and we depend greatly on the administrator to and you to keep us on track.
And that's what I'm here for, and that's what the importance, you're familiar with it,
Yeah.
with the rules and the laws based upon my guidance to you and along with the administration to give you that information.
And I would
so
be
that you are
happier
familiar
if
with
it said something more like that than that each member shall be thoroughly familiar with all. I mean, we don't make any of those statutes, laws, codes, or rules, plus the state is constantly, I forget the term, but imposing its will on local jurisdictions also. So I would be more comfortable with simply striking thoroughly, say we're familiar with these, and that we consider the advice of counsel in making decisions, if that's last phrase is necessary. That's my major concern with this. Thank you.
If I can just also add, as the commission, in response to 2.10, when we signed on for the commission, they gave us this very big book that had statutes and all those things, but also previous to us getting here, we do an overview and they send us all of the information. It is up to us in our due diligence to search. Remember, we signed up to have our part, as long as they present it, which I do believe this code encompass, it is up to us to be familiar with it. So I don't see any issues with it. And just also taking into consideration, we're one of the last boards to adhere to this. So this is something that is across all other boards, correct? Okay.
That particular language is.
Yes. And it's already in your existing.
No, don't believe so. In the 2014 rules, I couldn't find it. There's impartiality required, which I think I absolutely agree with, but I couldn't find
Oh, you're
the
correct.
familiarity with laws,
You're correct, but
the thoroughly
that
familiar with laws.
You're correct, but that is a provision that is for all the boards. That rule 2.10 is with all of the boards.
I remember when members of the ARC were personally sued, so I'm not exactly sure if the point of this in all the boards, is it to protect the city?
Mr. Gibbs, Commissioner Gibson, this is a rule of procedure so that you're familiar, putting it on each commission or board member to be familiar with the code sections and the laws associated with your role as a commission or a board member. And if you don't, I mean, I'm just putting the information out there. Again, each board and each commission has adopted these rules for consistency purposes, and that's what this is here for.
Any other questions for?
I have a few questions. Thank you for changing the quorum. My questions are related to 4.8 especially. That's the first one, I guess. And I think timing is good and not getting bogged down in agendas, but I actually don't agree with having a numerical limit, especially one that only has 3 cases, or it's so specific that it has 1 demo permit and 2 other applications. I've been on both sides, so I don't want to overburden the staff or people's time, but you know, you could have 10 applications of volunteers that nobody objected to, like the one we had today. So I don't agree with that numerical limit. I don't know if you want me to go through the other few that I have, or you want to talk about them
I can address
each
that.
time, or if you want me to
yeah,
just say what it is.
I think we'll just do one at a time. So each of the boards has a numerical limit that guides staff in not only for that particular agenda, but for subsequent agendas for the cycle of applications. And so, you know, in my determination, you know, I felt that this was reasonable, not only for the board's time, but also for the staff capacity to be able to produce the information that's needed for the hearings. And then I also added, or as determined appropriate by the administrator, so that I would have some flexibility with that to be able to accommodate if there were small requests like a application to go from contributing non-contributing to contributing, or something that's a little bit more compact. But that would be my recommendation, so that we're able to properly advise our clients, who at times will refer to our rules for being able to leverage getting onto a certain agenda. So we want to have some sort of boundaries on that aspect.
I appreciate that. If there's, I guess if that's what that clause means, that you all can be flexible on that. I saw the shall, so that's fine. I'll move on to my next one. My next one, on the very next one, 4.9, is a question. The first sentence, the first 180 days, is that 180 days from the application submission, or?
Of a complete application.
Okay, so it's the same as the 180 days down at the bottom of that paragraph, where it says it just says of submittal. So that might need to be clarified. I don't know if they were meant to be the same or different. That's just a question. And I think I only had, and then back to number 8 and the timing. Again, I get the timing. I will just, and I think 8.4, the 3 minutes is probably standard across every single thing in this city and every committee and council. And again, I represent developers and civic associations and neighborhoods, pro and con development, and 3 minutes isn't enough for anybody to really say what they mean. So that's just my, I would love to see that change to 5 minutes. If it's something we can't do or something nobody else agrees with, I just stated my position on the record. I don't think it helps the process, whether the residents or supporters or objectors. 3 minutes, you can't get your position out fairly, I don't think.
Just a reminder to the commission, you do have the authority upon a request from an app or a person giving public comment to give additional minute, give additional time. You do have that authority.
And does that need to say that in
No.
our bylaws? And then
That's just the rules of procedure. This is what this is.
Okay, and then, what about seating time for people who speak? I
don't know what you mean by seating time.
So if there's a group of people here and they want someone to represent them and speak on behalf of them, like the council has,
If the commission, yeah, it's already in the,
that is in here? What is it?
I'm on,
7.312.
Okay. Because I was just involved in a case where the VRB, the city's VRB, did not allow that because it wasn't in their bylaws, so.
rules of procedure.
In their rules of procedure. Whatever it wasn't in there. So it was not allowed. So this is 7 point what?
7.3.12. And just to give you an update, Commissioner Swift, the VRB had just recently adopted their revised rules of procedure that mirror this.
Yes, that, we're happy about that. And this is I think the same as the council has, is the 1 minute per 10 minute, up to a
Correct.
max of 10. Okay, thank you.
I did want to add that, dependent on the role of the individual speaker, they may not be subject to the 3 minute limit or the 10 minute maximum with donated time. If they're an agent or one of the, oriented with the petitioner, they would be under the larger scope of the presentation that's allowed for each respective board, 30 minutes in our case. So that's consistent with how we present with the Architecture Review Commission and the Barrio Latino Commission as well. We find that that's an adequate amount of time. However, if there's a situation that warrants you granting additional time, you certainly have the ability to do that under your authority.
I actually thought of one other question. Sorry. 8.8. A member will make a motion. Is that for timing, or it almost sounds like those are the only two motions a member can make?
Well, if you look on what that section is, it's a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Well, hearings on recommendations to city council.
Just like today, you had a recommendation, a motion to recommend or not recommend.
Right, so theoretically, what if we couldn't decide and wanted to table it or bring it back another day? What if we couldn't? What if there were 100 people here and we wanted to
So-
think about it? Is
Well,
that
if there's no
possible?
think about of an application, you have to make a motion at the public hearing. There's no thinking about it. You can't request a continuance, or it's up to the applicant on whether or not they want to continue an item. You can't just say to an applicant at a public, you have to make a decision at a public
You
hearing.
can't request more information. We don't have the authority to say, oh, we really like this, could you bring back a rendering of X, Y, Z?
Well, Commissioner, just again referring to, I don't know in what instance you would ask for something like that. But you have to, if during the presentation, the applicant is getting a sense or that they want a continuance, they can request a continuance, but you don't have the authority to say you need time, according to these rules of procedures, you need time. In your current rules of procedures, you cannot do that. You have to make a decision on that day.
Right.
Based upon the information that was given to you prior to the public hearing and the information that was presented at the public hearing. Those are your parameters.
So I perhaps worded my example wrong. If there was someone who had a designation, I can think of one that we had a year ago, that was very controversial, and I think if there were lots of questions, if we were going to ask them for, would you consider this option? You know, saving the facade, what would it look like? Something like that. We can't ask an applicant, especially if like, oh, we're leaning toward denial, what about this option? We're not allowed to ask an applicant to bring more information back to help to give them a chance,
Well, I don't know what give them a chance means.
to ask for more information.
So certain applications, it's upon the applicant, it's the applicant's burden to present evidence to support their request. It's not the board's position to just continue to work with an applicant to get them what they're asking for. If an applicant is not presenting competent and substantial evidence for you to approve an application, that's their burden that they did not meet. It's within your authority to deny an application for the applicant not presenting competent and substantial evidence to support what they're asking for. If you, within the prior information that was given to you before the public hearing, given from the staff, the packet, and the additional information that's presented at public, if you still have questions, it's okay, and those questions aren't answered, it's okay for this board to deny the application
Yeah,
or
that's
deny
not what
the
I'm,
request.
that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, what if we hear something from a presentation and we want to say, or from 100 people who are standing here and they say, we really, you know, we think, oh, here's a compromise. We are not allowed to ask the applicant to say, would you like to bring us a rendering or bring us another option?
May I-
Think about this.
May I kind of, because a lot of times we get fixated on the word and the process sort of fades behind us. But I'll give you an example that is kind of real world that happens every month with the Barrio Latino Commission and the Architecture Review Commission. Each applicant is entitled to an up or down vote of their application. The administrator and the staff in support has already determined the application's complete, or it wouldn't be in front of you. So they're entitled to an up or down vote at that public hearing that they've noticed for. When the staff is here and present, we're engaged in the conversations, and if we see that the conversation is going towards either there's a lack of clarity on information, or perhaps there's an opportunity to redesign or modify, adjust, then usually you'll see the staff member go to the applicant and say, this is what I'm observing. This looks like it may be going to a denial, let's say, for sake of discussion. In the event, would you prefer to continue, or do you want an up or down vote? So we're kind of the liaison between the applicants and the board. So that kind of falls on us, but the responsibility of the board is not to engage in any sort of compromise. You're looking at the compliance of that particular request with respective code and references.
So if they don't ask for a continuance,
You're just
we can
approving or
only
denying.
approve or deny what's
Correct.
before.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I have been called overly pedantic. If I'm understanding them, the applicants have the right to that up or down vote. And though at the beginning of this, it references Robert's Rules of Order, I think Roberts allows that once a motion is made, you can also then make a subsequent motion to table the previous one. But is that not a right that we have? I
To
don't-
table a previous motion.
And I'm not an expert on
You could-
Roberts.
Yeah, you could withdraw a motion, but you can't. you
There
can
is in
amend it.
Robert's rules, rules for tabling a motion.
Tabling agenda items, which I was gonna ask about,
I
because there's
think
nothing in here.
tabling a motion, or let's just say, we don't have the right to table things that are before us as an application, is that
Correct,
correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners?
I do. I have a question about the alternate and the chair, because that seems to be a conflict. So being a alternate, it says that in 2.2, alternate members shall sit only when a member is unable to attend a meeting. But then that conflicts with the requirements of a chair, because I'm a vice chair, but I'm also an alternate. So how does that work?
I don't understand your question.
How would it work if I'm not necessarily supposed to be at any of the meetings unless somebody's missing, but then serve as a vice chair?
I think I don't know that that's, and staff can answer that one. I think there hasn't been a member at each meeting for her to be able to attend each meeting.
I think today. Right?
Well, the full board is 7 members.
Oh, okay.
So 7 members, and then if you had 7 members, then the alternate would not need to attend. But in application, we've been very short on that number for quite a while. It's really up to the discretion of the commission how it chooses to elect its officers. And you know, you have sort of that acknowledgement at the end that you can modify the rules and adapt these, you know, to fit your particular situation. But on all the boards, we've had alternates that have served as officers, just knowing that if the dynamic of the board changed and there was a full board, that individual may not be able to serve that function for that particular meeting.
Okay. And it's usually 7 supposed to be present.
7 is
Is it?
well, 7 is a full commission.
Okay.
9, there's 2 alternates, so 9 members, which, you know, it's our goal, but unfortunately, we usually can't fill the entire board just because of the dynamics of appointments and whatnot.
Commission, are there any other questions at this time? All right, at this time, if there is a motion to either approve or deny the rules of procedures, update and adoption.
I'll move to approve the proposed rules of procedure.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
We have 3 in favor, 1 opposed. I don't count.
You can vote on the motion.
I would like to vote in favor to accept the procedure updates and adoption. So we have 4 in favor, 1 opposed, moving forward with the ayes. Thank you, Commission.
Thank you, Commissioners. Moving on to our last item, as we had previously presented, we are bringing you sections of the Ybor City Design Standards updates as they become complete and appropriate for presentation. So with that, we'll ask Heather Bonds to come up and lead a discussion on the most recent section.
All right, good morning. Heather Bonds, Historic Preservation Specialist. I'm going to be providing you an update on our design standards. Just to review, the reason why we're updating the design standards is it's been over 40 years since they've been developed. There's a lot of new issues in preservation, a lot of new materials out there. So we're addressing some of those with these new standards. Our objectives are to assist the property owners, provide specific measurements of success, address modern topics, become a more ADA compliant document, be reformatted for better organization, and overall just to include user-friendly tools. We want to make this document usable for people. These are the 6 sections we are proposing. And in our last review of the standards, it was suggested that we go back to the beginning and start with the introduction to set the tone for these standards. So that is what I'll be presenting to you today. We begin with the purpose of a historic district, which is to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through preservation, protection, and regulation of buildings, sites, monuments, structures, and characteristics of historic importance within the Ybor City area of our city. Ybor City grew from the vision of Spanish-born Vincent Martinez Ybor, who at the close of the 19th century ventured to transform 40 swamp-laden acres into a robust cigar manufacturing center. Attracting experienced cigar workers from Spain, Cuba, and Italy, Ybor's enterprise quickly earned Tampa the distinction of the cigar capital of the world. The immigrant population of cigar workers produced a unique social and economic environment that persevered beyond the decline of the cigar industry in the 1930s. We recognize the importance of this area by developing design standards to promote the preservation of Ybor City's historic district's cultural and built environments. This commission understands the importance of historic design standards, but for those unfamiliar with the district or why design standards are important, we provide an overview of these purposes. Those purposes include to interpret general design criteria referenced in our ordinances, to preserve and improve historic buildings, to protect the distinctive historic character of Ybor City, protect private and public property values, encourage investment in historic resources, increase public awareness of design options, provide interested parties with standards and criteria for evaluating, planning, and designing their project, and provide the BLC, city staff, and city officials with standards to evaluate appropriate preservation treatments to ensure the historic integrity of Ybor City's local historic district. In describing how a person will use these standards, we review each section and the treatments in historic preservation. Each treatment will determine the appropriate section to work in. To encourage the understanding of Ybor's historic significance, we provide a brief history of Ybor and its key historical figures. There are many articles and books written about Ybor and these fascinating people that we provide reference to in Section 6 references. Included in the history is the historic designations, including the designation of a portion of Ybor City as a National Historic Landmark District, one of the highest levels of historic significance in the country and granted only to 3 others in the state of Florida, being St. Augustine, Miami Beach, and the Pensacola Naval Air Station. As we elaborate on the importance of preservation, we provide what it can do for community and property owners. The University of Florida has produced reports that examine and prove the positive economic impacts of historic preservation. This document is also referenced in our sources and contains valuable information for advocates in the preservation field. To continue to encourage preservation, we provide incentive programs to offset preservation costs, such as the tax exemption program, grants and loans to qualifying properties and projects, and acknowledge historic buildings with plaques, as shown here. It's the little itty-bitty plaque next to the door. We also provide an overview of how zoning districts regulations, dimensional regulations, and allowed uses are considered. We include city and district maps and charts to outline the boundaries and criteria of these regulatory areas. Knowing which of the 9 YC or EBOR city districts a property is in is the first step in developing or adding a property. Therefore, we've included the introduction as a lead into project planning. And I'll note in the original design guidelines, it only went up to YC7, so we're addressing YC8 and YC9 as well. The main purpose of developing these guidelines is for review of certificates of appropriateness. We have 2 processes, the staff level or administrative review and the public hearing. The scope of work will determine which process is appropriate. We've added project planning as a tool for users. This customer in mind section provides the most relative information to begin a rehabilitation, preservation, maintenance, or new construction project in Ybor City. The project maintenance will be adopted and your input will be welcome as to which process is appropriate for the scope of the project and contributing status. Contributing, which are the historic homes or buildings, should be reviewed to the highest standards or review levels, and non-contributing structures, which are the structures that were built after the period of significance, or older structures which are heavily altered. We've listed the most requested projects for review. Those not listed or have special circumstances, the code provides that the Historic Preservation Architectural Review Administrator have final decision on the proper review process. We also provide a CA process steps for both processes, so applicants and property owners are well aware of the steps and timelines of each project. We then break down the public hearing process for those in the public hearing process. Again, this transparency aids applicants in knowing what to expect in every step of the way. Finally, breaking down that public hearing process, the applicant's responsibility or the applicant's presentation. We provide examples of the visuals that applicants should present to the board. We want every applicant to be prepared and set each applicant up for an informative presentation to the board. That wraps up our introduction. I'm also going to review section 5, setting elements. We are finishing up this section. And I'll summarize for you what we have, what topics are covered in setting elements. The purpose of part 5, or section 5, setting elements, is to develop standards for elements that compose a site. The overall setting of a historic building encompasses the entire site, including important features like landscapes, streetlights, signs, benches, walkways, and parking areas. These secondary elements support and contribute to the site's sense of place. As I mentioned, this section is wrapping up, and I'll highlight what we've included. First up is landscaping. Our proposed standard is that landscaping shall be maintained and plant material shall be selected to reflect the predominant pattern in the sub-district. That's the YC1, YC2, YC3. In Ybor, this pattern is typically simple, as residential landscaping was historically for a working class. Permits in a CA are not typically required for landscaping, so this standard is to encourage maintenance of each lot. Expanding from the yard, we address fence and wall standards, which shall be appropriate in scale and material to the overall site. Most fences and walls do not require a permit, but do require a CA review to ensure scale, materials, and height are compatible with the site. One of the newer products that need to be addressed in the updates is the use of artificial turf. The proposed standard is that artificial turf shall only be allowed in areas not visible to the rights of ways or for use by educational or public recreation areas, such as the top example, which is a playground. We have several sections that review paved areas, including streets, driveways, parking area, curbs, and sidewalks, and we go into depth to each of those areas. Additional sections review more of the utilitarian objects within the district. That's everything from trash bins, benches, sidewalk cafe tables and chairs, lighting standards, which are those 5 globe lights throughout Ybor, how we address solar panels, ADA ramps, and mechanical equipment, and basic yard decorations. Setting features will end with sign standards for the various signs found and allowed in the district. The criteria standard requires historic signage to be preserved in place even when a new business comes in, such as Bernini's, where you see it was part of the Bank of Ybor building. We preserved that sign. And the new Haya sign, Hotel Haya sign, you can see the ghosting of the Las Navidades bakery or cafe that was there previously. All new signage shall be historically referenced by the types of signs already established in the district. We're working through this section to include the information most relevant to historic preservation. We do include some zoning code references, but do not expand too much on those complex codes. That is a summary of what we've included in setting elements, which is essentially updating our previous guidelines and adding those new topics that were not trending in the 1980s when the original guidelines were created. To review the upcoming steps, once we have the completed draft, we will bring the whole draft to you. We also will publicly notice it to the neighborhood and residents and seek approval recommendations from the BLC. Then we come back before this board for a recommendation to be adopted to City Council, then 2 City Council public hearings for final review and adoption. Our 2024 goals are still trying to get the final draft. Each chapter at least is outlined or started. So hopefully we'll be wrapping all of those up this year and you'll be seeing the final product in 2025. Any questions?
On the signs, is that the, referencing the historic sign, is that in the current design guideline, or is that something that?
It does state that it needs to be historically referenced.
Yeah, I actually just noticed the Hotel Haya sign.
The ghosting?
With the ghosting, and it's very cool, and I love that.
I know these are design standards for architecture. As the token archaeologist on the commission, I just want to express my hope that the staff will consider incorporating some consideration of archaeological resources within the district. We've lost a lot in Ybor City. Ybor's house was no longer standing, but the lot was undeveloped. It was a gravel parking lot. Since I don't know what was preserved, but we never got a chance to look at it archaeologically because it was redeveloped. So it's not going to factor in a large part into these design standards, but when you get into things like redevelopment, demolition on a non-contributing, it's non-contributing architecturally, but there could be contributing archaeological resources there that should be, I mean, it'd be nice if we could get those considered. We get them considered downtown because of the CBD and associated, regulations, but I think a lot of that is falling through the cracks in Ybor.
Thank you for your comment. We'll try to address that.
So I wanted to add to that. So obviously the design standards are, as you mentioned, are focused on historic development and preservation of historic resources. But we are currently engaged in a comprehensive code update. Actually, the kickoff event was last night for that. And I've been working with the consultant on that. And I think more appropriately capturing those opportunities for archaeological investigation would be embedded within the code more effectively than the design standards.
You're right, but you have the chart where you have like X's with like demolition not contributing, non-contributing, but that's so architecturally focused that, you know, the property is contributing because of the architecture, but we don't know if there's archaeological
Right.
resources, right? So that's what.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to capture that within the standards, but the real
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
momentum would be in the ordinance.
I think that's a really good point, especially in Ybor, because for the parking lots that will someday be redeveloped, even if everything else already has some historic building on it, I think that's an important focus for those parcels that are clearly just now asphalt, but someday are gonna have something on it. There's an opportunity there.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner? Thank you for your presentation. At this time, is there any new business?
They have the books. Okay. I forgot to mention earlier that you all were provided with a landmark designation book, including the historic districts for 2024 that the staff produced. So we produce those usually every 3 years or so to update the inventory of properties that are within them and use them as a resource internally in the city. It's obviously available on the website as well. And then we produce some limited printed copies to provide to specific neighborhood organizations and to our commissioners on our various boards. So hope you enjoy that, and we appreciate any feedback that we can receive to improve it in the future. Thank you.
Really nice.
Can I, is it appropriate for me to make another comment on something earlier at this point? Or is that-
Yes, this is.
It's okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say the preservation progress, I don't know if it'd be possible to, like, I know you have the plaques for historic structures, but something that showed, you know, the before and after photos and put it on the building and generate more public support, I think would be a good, because in that case, it was very dramatic. And,
Yeah.
You know, I think it would just, there's a lot of foot traffic there too, just something that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. We'll kind of brainstorm on that. I mean, I think those are sort of lost opportunities when you can't really show the drama behind a project like that.
Yeah.
Some of them are pretty impressive.
I also just spoke to the Historic Preservation Commission of Pinellas on the matter, archaeological matter, and they have, one of the county commissioners sits in their meeting, and it's, can stimulate action in a way that we don't get.
Interesting, okay.
Also, commissioners, if you can please take a look at the 2025 Historic Preservation Commission schedule. Make sure you can add those to your calendars as well. Is there any other new business for the commission? All right. At this time, if I can receive a motion to receive and file any submitted documents and exhibits. I don't think there were any today.
So moved.
Accepted.
No, was there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. All right, the time is 10:25, and the meeting for the historic preservation is adjourned. Thank you.